internal family systems for you, the accomplishment coaching leaders. And this is about how IFS can expand your impact. You're already a transformational leader and coach. So just a little bit of background about IFS. So it was created by Dr. Dick Schwartz about 40 years ago. And at the time, it was a really different kind of, and still is, psychological model in the therapy world, not using the DSM-4 kind of diagnosing and fixing people or teaching them how to control their thoughts and behaviors. Dick really taught people how to turn towards themselves with compassion and curiosity. And for this reason, I've heard him say numerous times that coaches are actually better equipped to support people with IFS than therapists because we have less to unlearn. We already know that our clients are perfect and whole and complete, and they have all the answers inside them. IFS is evidence-based, and it works at the subconscious level. And when I say evidence-based, there's just really good research on everything from rheumatoid arthritis to PTSD that have been very successful with IFS. And it's a whole person approach. It integrates mind, body, and spirit. So let's get into the IFS model. So in the IFS model, one of the main ideas is that the mind is multiple, which is distinct from the traditional view of the mind being singular, kind of like my mind, my ego, my personality, that kind of a thing. It's the nature of the mind to be multiple. It's not a problem. Parts are distinct subpersonalities. They each are unique. They have their own way of thinking, feeling, and behaving. They've had their own perspectives, experiences, and talents, and they're all useful and valuable to the system. And we already talk in the language of parts, which is why Dick called it that. When we say something like, a part of me really wants to go out to that party tonight, and a part of me really wants to stay home in my jammies and watch Netflix or something, right? So that's what we mean by parts. There are 3 types of parts: exiles, managers, and firefighters. And managers and firefighters fall under the category of protectors. First, let's talk about exiles. So exiles are our young, wounded inner children. You may have heard of like inner child work. This is a more specific and sophisticated way of doing inner child work and more. So exiles are created when we don't have the resources we need for an overwhelming experience. Because of having this kind of overwhelming experience and not having the resources to process it, exiles carry burdens. So burdens are the painful memories, emotions, and beliefs that this part got stuck with when they had that experience. Because of these burdens, this experience is just too overwhelming. The exile, this part, gets exiled, gets pushed away from the system. It's just too much to bear. So the part gets pushed into the subconscious, so we don't have to feel that overwhelm and hurt that it experienced and is carrying. When we talk about the core fears that are at the center of our survival mechanism in the essence conversation, this is, to me, the most akin to exiles. There's actually really extraordinary processes in IFS to bring exiles out of the past and have them be able to unburden and release those beliefs and those experiences so that they're not driving the system anymore. But for most people, they're driving the system because they're frozen in time and in the place that this happened in our subconscious. To give you an example about this, imagine that there's like a 3-year-old little girl who is in a family of 5 kids, and her mom just made some amazing smelling chocolate chip cookies and puts a big plate of them on the table. And let's say the little girl toddles over and she starts putting all of the cookies onto her own plate. And maybe this mom comes over and says, "What's wrong with you? You're so selfish. Don't you know there's other people here? That's it. No cookies for you. Go to your room." And so this young girl has an overwhelming experience, maybe of shame, right? And maybe she gets stuck with the belief, I'm bad, I'm selfish, it's bad to want things. But it's too much. Like a 3-year-old can't actually hold that. So the system exiles that part that wants things, that desires things, and it stays there, locked away as a 3-year-old with the burden of those beliefs and that experience of shame. Our system needs a way to keep these exiles locked away, and that's where protectors come in. As I said before, there's 2 types of protectors: managers, which are proactive, and firefighters, which are reactive. They work differently, which I'm going to explain in a minute, but both of them are dedicated to safety, so safety of the exiles, and homeostasis, balance in the whole system, that the system not get overwhelmed. So first, let's talk about managers. Managers, like I said, are proactive. They maintain control, they prevent pain. Their motto is never again. So some common roles, there are many, but just some common roles of managers are the critic, which almost everyone has when they start this, controller, caretaker, perfectionist, worrier. And really, they're the ones that run our lives as our managers for the most part. Most people's managers are running their lives. They organize our lives and our relationships such that our exiles won't get triggered. So let's say, for example, let's say now that 3-year-old girl is 23 and she's got a boyfriend and he asks her, where do you want to go to dinner? So what do you think she would say? Probably something like, I don't care, wherever you want to go, right? Because she's exiled the part of her that holds desire, that wants things and can't be selfish. So now she's got this people-pleasing protector for that exile. No desire, no experience of being selfish and shame. However, despite the best efforts of our managers, life will at times trigger our exiles anyway. And that's when firefighters jump into action. Firefighters act reactively to soothe the pain quickly. They seek relief, a lot of times through distracting or numbing. Examples: overeating, overachieving, codependency, rage, excessive screen time, workaholism, lots of things. They react once the exile is starting to get triggered to put out the fire. They get a really bad rap because they don't care about the consequences and can make really big messes in our lives. Addictions are firefighters. But the thing is that they just have to put out the fire. And if you think about it, when a real firefighter goes into an actual house, they're not thinking, oh, should I save this art? Is this an heirloom? They're just putting the fire out and the consequences be damned. And so that's how firefighters are in our life. And so a lot of times when people are like, it's just so not rational, but they're just blowing up their lives or self-sabotaging, it's often because a firefighter is at play. So let's say, I'll keep with the cookie example. Let's say now this woman is 32 and she goes out for the day with a group of women friends for a birthday. They go to the spa. She spends a lot more time and money on herself than she usually does. It's quite luxurious. And they have a great time. But she's got a little bit of a nagging guilt or shame. And when she comes home, maybe she finds herself binging Netflix and ice cream or doom scrolling the news. And she doesn't know it's because this exile has been triggered. And she's just, what's wrong? I had a great day. And then I went and did all that when she wakes up the next morning. And it's usually because of firefighters at play. The other thing I want to say about protectors is that they're really the heroes of the system. They've given up their natural roles to protect the exiles and to protect the system as a whole. And they're also tragic, though, because they're driven by fear and they're constrained by those individual strategies that they use. They can't not do what they do. They also never really accomplish their goal because the exiles aren't really safe and they tend to produce what they're trying to avoid. So going home and eating ice cream and binging Netflix to avoid shame, what probably will happen is then there'll be shame about that, right? So that happens. However, our protectors work. They tend to create what they're trying to avoid. A little bit more about parts. Parts are interrelated. They impact each other. So they're like a mobile or a family, which is why it's called internal family systems. When we work with one part, we are impacting the other parts. Often protector parts are polarized with each other, which means that they're trying to get the same result, but they have a different way of doing that. And it puts them at odds with each other. So this can make people really indecisive, or they can also make them like stop and start with different kinds of projects or intended results. As coaches, we can unknowingly spark what's called a backlash by aligning with the good parts, those ones that are full of possibility and enrolled and willing to go outside their comfort zone. And we manage or sideline kind of the bad ones that are full of fear and unwilling to move forward. So that can cause what I'm calling a backlash. I'll give you an example. Let's say you have a client who is up to some really big intended results. and they're on the call with you and they get really enrolled in possibility and they make really big promises of what they're going to do in the following week. And they just leave all jazzed up, right? But then maybe they get off the call and then in the week following, they don't actually keep those promises. And I don't know about you, but I've had this happen. You may have had this happen. So what may have happened is that other parts that were not enrolled in the possibility created some backlash. So maybe this person has a manager that's an avoiding part. Maybe this one is protecting against the humiliation of failing, right? And this one, the avoider, gets the client really busy. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it's the best time ever to clean the garage, right? That week instead of doing those practices. But then maybe there's another part that's polarized with the avoider who's a critic, who's beating the client up because they're cleaning the garage instead of doing their practices and moving their project forward. But even the critic is trying to help, just trying to get the client in action. And if you think about it, the critic is also trying to get the client to avoid humiliation and failure by not doing the practices. So they're just doing it in different ways, but they ping off each other. And so the more that the avoider avoids and the person's cleaning out the garage and they've got this critic who's beating them up, the more intense it can become. And it might even get so overwhelming that a firefighter jumps in to shut it down. Maybe the person quits the project. Maybe they create a breakdown. Maybe they come on and say they want to quit coaching. Who knows, right? But this is what can happen because parts trigger other parts. And if we only align with the ones that we think are the good ones, then we might not be working with the whole system. So this also brings me to another major tenet of IFS, which is that there are no bad parts. All parts have a purpose and a good intention. They may cause harmful consequences, like I said, but parts are not the burdens that they carry. And so IFS helps to unburden, not eliminate parts. The parts that do carry burdens, they're not at choice. They're really governed by those burdens, those distressing memories, the emotions, the sensations, the negative belief. They're operating in the subconscious in a way that pushes on the person to think and feel and behave in the way that he or she does. The protectors also carry burdens of their own extreme roles and their distorted beliefs. So all of their behavior is governed by these burdens, some to a more stronger or lesser degree, but they're all governed by these burdens. So we want to reduce them or eliminate the burdens, but we don't do that by controlling or demonizing any parts, even the ones that are really getting in the way of what some of our parts want. So how do we do that? How do we support them? How do we help parts be able to be in constructive roles? For that, you need one more piece of this model, which is self. So self, with a capital S, it's what IFS refers to as the thing that every spiritual tradition has recognized, right? That there's this divine essence that's at the core of each person. This may sound familiar, this essence piece, right? And the thing about self is that self is not a part. Self is never burdened and it can't be changed. And self energy is always there. Self is like the sun that can be obscured by clouds. But even on a very cloudy day, when we don't feel the sun, we don't experience it, it's still there. And so we don't need to generate self energy. We don't need to practice being self. We already are self. That's just who we are. And when parts relax and they can soften back because they start to trust that it's safe to do, self is what's there. That's just what emerges spontaneously. Self is universal, but each of us have our own expression of it. We're like each have our own little bit different prism that the light of self shines through, right? That we in accomplishment coaching call our essence. But to check in on self energy, there's these commonalities that we can check in. It's called the 8 C's. So the 8 C's of self energy are calm, curious, compassionate, creative, courageous, clarity, confidence, and connectingness. It's a description of the presence of a ontological coach, right? That's how we show up. So checking in with the amount of self energy that we have at any moment is really easy to do through these things. So what we want to do is we want to increase our access to self and support our parts. one of the first way we do that is through unblending. So unblending is observing with some distance and perspective, right? I have parts, but I am self. The difference might be like the difference of being blended with a part would be me saying, oh my gosh, I'm so overwhelmed right now. Versus when I'm unblended, I can say a part of me is really overwhelmed by this, but I'm not actually completely blended with that. There's some distance between me and with my part, right? And this is not just a conceptual thing, it's a lived experience. And just this is really huge for people. And it's not just a concept. This is actually literal. There's an actual shift inside when parts unblend. There's a mindfulness aspect here, right? Where I'm not my thoughts. But when traditional mindfulness stops with being a neutral observer of our thoughts, of our feelings, of our experiences, and IFS goes beyond that and actually supports creating a loving relationship between parts and self, which is what I want to talk to you about now and how we do that. So self is what does the work. You ever heard love is the medicine, right? Self is this healing presence that provides a place for parts to be able to unburden. So self is like a loving, wise, and attuned parent for these young parts that are really ill-equipped, over-functioning little children. And it's like Lord of the Flies in there. Lord of the Flies is this movie where all these kids are stranded on the island and it became really tribalistic and they're all vying for control and they've all got their own strategies and there's no calm leader. There's no adult in the room. And so that's the problem because these parts work against each other. So with self, parts actually have a place that they can be attuned to, get their needs met, be heard, be validated, be supported, and they can soften back and realize they don't have to take over so much. This is where we get connected to our intuition, our knowing. Through guided exercise, we help clients go inside, unblend from their parts. Self hears what the parts need and help the parts learn to trust the self. So self is a competent leader for wary parts. Self knows how to care for parts and leads system outside and inside of our lives. So the coach, like I said, supports the client to build trusting relationships with the parts. And as those parts develop trust in self, they are so happy to relax and soften back and have a leader there. I want to say protective parts need validation, appreciation, and reassurance that there's a better way. They are almost always exhausted when we meet them. If you ask a protective part what their experience of their job is, they will say, I'm exhausted. They are also, these protector parts are often shocked to find out that we're not children. Like that 3-year-old part that was exiled, when met through self, will be shocked that we're not still 3 years old. And it's an incredible experience for them to be updated on that information and to actually feel our presence and who we are today with the resources that we have and who we can be for them. Working with protectors alone creates huge shifts for people. Self becomes a resource for the parts, and the parts become a resource for self. They can step forward when we need them and step back when we don't. Like an organizing part is really useful when we want to clean our office, but if it's not burdened, it won't be this perfectionistic part that makes a 1-day job into a 2-month job because it has to all be perfect. Life goes way better when self is leading and parts are assisting versus blending, taking over, and running on fear and old beliefs. So last thing I want to say about self is just about being self-led. Besides producing access to new ways of being and doing, this process of building self-to-part relationships inside, I'll say for myself, has been the most extraordinary access I've ever had to self-love. I don't know about you, but a lot of us coaches have a lot of pretty strong inner critics. And I had one that after all the work I had done, I could manage it, but it was still nipping at my heels most of the time. And so that's been an incredible experience for me to really be able to have the experience of being unblended from my parts. So when parts trust self, people react less, they make better choices, they have healthier relationships, experience more play, joy, and pleasure, create results with more ease, and like I said, have greater self-love and inner peace. Here's just some examples of like client work that I've done using IFS. So, one, I was working with this woman who I adore, who I'll call an overfunctioning CEO. When we started coaching, she was working for 70 to 100 hours a week. She had zero self care and she knew better. She'd been working with a therapist for a long time. Her boyfriend complained all the time that she was risking her health, but she couldn't do the things that she was being asked to do in therapy. Her therapist said, while your fourth cup of coffee is brewing, just for 5 minutes, sit there and breathe and don't be listening to anything. And she just couldn't do it. And she felt horrible about it, right? Because she couldn't do it. Every month or so, she'd have a massive meltdown where she would just go in her room and turn on off the lights and bawl her eyes out. And she felt horrible. And she was running this massive company. We did IFS work. She was able to meet her workaholic part, her critical part. She was able to learn what they were protecting. And they were able to start to trust her self-energy. So they didn't have to work so hard. She didn't have to control herself into doing anything, but she was able to start having these moments of quiet, of connecting with her own parts at home, and her over-functioning parts were able to start relaxing. So she was working less. She started going to doctors again. She hadn't gone to the dentist in many years. She just had less stress and less self-judgment. A couple of more. So I had a client who was a coach who was considering a full-time job and was considering keeping her business on the side. She had a part that was really relieved by the idea of some stable income and structure. She had a part that felt like she would be a failure if she got a job and wasn't a full-time coach anymore. And she had a part that was worried about managing it all because she was a very busy mom and having a full-time job and a coaching practice felt like a lot. So we just did one IFS session. Each part was heard by her self-energy, validated, and she mediated with them. She was able to meet their needs. And then she made a choice that was empowered for all of them. And she could walk into her first day of the job without any conflict in her system around that. And then lastly, I wanted to share, I had this client who struggled with over shopping for a long decades, which may sound frivolous, but besides negatively impacting her income and her spending money, she lived with a lot of shame about it. And so after a couple of sessions with working with her part, she found herself spending the next few months purging and organizing her house. She didn't have any practices around that, and that's not always the case. Sometimes parts need and want structure and want practices, but this was just something that she was inspired to do when those parts were supported. And she created so much joy with it. She kept sending me pictures of the beautiful spaces that she was creating in her home. So there just wasn't any like control involved. I just want to point out that all the examples I gave and most of what I talked about today was just around protectors. I think I might have said earlier, there's also a really incredible and magical process for unburdening exiles so that they can actually give up their beliefs and the energy and experience from those that they're holding. And then protectors can give up their jobs because they don't have that exile to protect anymore. Lastly, I'll say that as a coach using IFS, I think one of the most important things I do is to do my own IFS work, just like you doing all of your work, right? And it really builds on our ontological work. There's nothing really contradictory about it. To me, it's just an expansion. I have what we call some self-like parts, as most helping professionals do. Parts that have agendas, such as providing value or having clients meet their goals, feeling more empowered, not quitting coaching, those kinds of things. And so working with those parts, they're not in the space when the client and I are meeting. And that way they get to just be with me. So we're going to do a little guided exercise so you can meet one of your protector parts. This is going to be just between you and yourself. Choose a manager to do this with. Maybe you're related to one of the managers I mentioned, like a controller or a caretaker, a perfectionist or a worrier. If you can't think of one, pick your critic, because we all have those. And maybe pick one that you want to start to change your relationship with a little bit. And maybe just start the process of helping it see that it doesn't have to dominate so much in your life. So try not to overthink this, just pick one, and we'll call it the target part. Likely you'll want to close your eyes, most people do. So just as you're getting settled, I want to share a couple things. First of all, you really can't do this wrong. If you're anything like me, you will have a part come up during this exercise that will have a concern that you're doing it wrong. And if that happens, it's okay. And I invite you to just notice it as a part. Also, if you're anything like me, you may have a part that comes up that's a skeptical part. And when I first started doing IFS, my skeptical part came up every single time. And that's okay too. It might say that you're just making all this up or this is just a bunch of woo whatever and not buy any of it. And that's okay. So just notice that as a part two. And this will just be about maybe 10 minutes max. I invite you to close your eyes if you're comfortable doing that and just start taking a couple of deep breaths. Just start to feel your seat in the chair and turn your attention inward. Allow your body to just be supported by the chair. And feel your breath as it expands and it contracts in your lungs. And just invite yourself to be open and curious here. So now just call forth the experience of the part that you picked. Maybe you call forth a recent time with this part when it was activated. And just notice what it feels like when you're aware of this part. Maybe you notice a thought pattern that arises with it. Maybe there's an energy or an emotion that's associated with it. Just notice the experience that you're having as you're aware of it. See if you can find this part in, on, or around your body. Just get curious and see where it shows up. And if you can't find it in, on, around your body, it's okay. But it can serve as an anchor point if you do. Just allow your attention to rest wherever you experience it. And as you focus on it, just see if there's anything else that you notice. And now ask yourself, just inside, how do I feel towards this part? You may dislike it because it's causing consequences in your life. Or you may like it and fear losing it because you depend on it. But just notice how you feel towards it. And whatever that is okay. So if you feel anything besides maybe curiosity and compassion for this part, that's just a different part showing up and showing you how they feel towards this part. So just go ahead and acknowledge any other parts that have shown up that have thoughts or feelings about this part. Just silently recognize them, let them know you see them, you're aware of them. And ask them if they would be willing to give you a little room just to get to know this target part. Assure them you're not going to give this part any more power or let it take over. But you just want a little space to be with this one. And see if they're willing to do that. Don't try and force it. It's okay if they're not. But see if they can relax, give you a little space. So if they did soften back, you may notice a little shift in you towards a calm curiosity towards your target part. Even if you still have some hesitancy about this part, you just need enough curiosity to know that you've got just a little bit of self-energy on board. And if that's not happening, it's okay. It's just because some other parts are afraid to let you do that right now. And we need to respect that. They might need some attention from you first or something else from you first. So if you have parts that haven't softened back, you could just spend this time finding out their concerns and get to know them this time instead. Or you can just listen for the rest of this time and notice which of your parts come up. But if you did get at least a little curious towards the target part, go ahead and recognize it. Let it know that you see it. Maybe send it some love from your heart. And now ask this part, how are you trying to help me? And just try and wait for an answer. It might show you, or you might just get something or see something. Just ask it, how are you trying to help me? And if you got some sense of how this part is trying, go ahead and extend some appreciation to it, or just how hard it's been working to try and help you, even if it's a little misguided or making some messes. And now I'd invite you to ask this part, what are you afraid would happen if you didn't do this job inside of me? Again, just try not to think and just wait for an answer. And if you're not getting anything, maybe assure the part that you're not going to try and take its job away. You just want to learn more about it. And just check in and see, what are you afraid would happen if you didn't do this job inside of me? And if it answered that one, then now you've learned what it's trying to protect you from. And you can give it some appreciation for that as well. And if you can, notice how the part responds to being connected with you and your appreciation. And if you notice yourself getting distracted or having judgments about how this is going, just let those other parts know that you're safe and ask if they'll allow you to spend just a little bit more time here. And so now you might ask your target part, how old do you think I am? And just wait and see what it says. You might just have a knowing. And if it answered, it probably got your age wrong. So go ahead and update it. Just let it know how old you are. You can silently tell it or just show it who you are today. Let it see that you're all grown up now. You can handle a lot more than when it got its job. And just see how the part responds to this information. And lastly, ask this part what kind of relationship it would just love to have with you. And just practice listening with an open heart. You don't need to fix or change anything, but just allow the part to know how it would like to be in connection with you. And when that feels complete, just really thank the part for letting you get to know it a little bit today, if it did. And also thank the parts that gave you space, if they did. And if you had parts that didn't give you space, let them know that you see them. And just acknowledge them for how much they're trying to help you and keep you safe. And once that feels complete, you can take your time and just begin to shift your focus back outside. So I used to do the coaching versus therapy talk in the program because I was a therapist. This is my answer. It may be different for other people. My answer is that I agree with Dick that coaches are very well equipped, especially ontological coaches who have access to being and being with, to do this work. I don't think it's a matter of this is for therapy. This issue, for example, is for therapy or this issue is for coaching. If you think about it, there are relationship coaches and relationship therapists. There are business coaches, and this idea that coaching is just for producing results and moving forward and therapy is for doing healing work. More times than not, especially as ontological coaches, we're working with people's limiting beliefs. We're working with their ways of being. We're working with their relationship to themselves and others in life. So for this, I think that the difference, the thing for me that makes the line that's important is the one of what is it that my parts can be with from a loving and compassionate and curious place where I'm not going to get activated. So if someone comes to me who's in active addiction or eating disorder or something like that, I'm not going to work with them, not because there aren't IFS practitioners that do that, but because I have parts that would know that there's information that I don't have to be able to do that work. I work with executives, I work with other coaches, I work with people who have intended results of all kinds. And all I'm doing is I'm working with what we AC coaches call the survival mechanism in a different way. I'm doing it with moving into some of the source and some of the subconscious. It is healing. It just is. It's healing to love ourselves and to connect with our parts. But I don't have a problem with that. To me, that doesn't mean therapy. Healing just means a return to wholeness and integrating all of who we are. There's not that much difference in the sense that of the work that we're doing. For me as a coach, what's the difference between an IFS coach and therapist out in the world is honestly not very different. All of the coaches that are trained in the same model, I've been trained in the exact same way. What I'm doing now that's different is I'm pairing IFS work with the structures and the supports of coaching, like having intended results and tracking progress and using structures as works for a particular person's parts and systems. So to me, that's really IFS coaching. Most people, if you go and you Google an IFS coach, you're going to find people who don't have a degree in therapy, but are doing the exact same thing that an IFS therapist would do. And I think that's in some ways unfortunate because coaching has so much to offer beyond what therapy does as far as producing results in our lives on the outside, not just the inside. You're working inside people's systems, right? It's delicate, right? But the protectors aren't going to let you go to the exiles unless they trust you, and they trust the client to do that. So we can try and push back protectors and bypass them. But like I said, there'll be backlash and you won't get very far. If you go to an exile when protectors haven't really stepped back, even if you think they have, you just won't be able to reach the exile. And one thing, this is a whole nother subject, but there are experiences where we can bypass protectors like plant medicine, right? And they can blow open a whole lot for people. And if we don't do it with some pre-work to get all the protectors on board and to do integration, then there can be backlash in that way because we're basically putting protectors asleep, dealing with a lot of exiles, and then the protectors come back in and don't really know what to do with the new normal, and it can get crazy for people. So here's some recommended resources. First of all, here's some books. So by Dr. Dick Schwartz, No Bad Parts is my favorite. That's a great book to read if you're starting out on this. There's also a newish, I think it came out this year, IFS workbook by the Institute and by Dick that helps you work through. And then You're the One You've Been Waiting For is an amazing book. They say it's for intimate relationships, but it's great for any relationships. It's just great in that endeavor of being self-led. Also, working with an IFS coach one-on-one is a very powerful experience to support you to work with your own parts. And then I want to talk about Bill Tierney. So Bill Tierney, some of you know, is a accomplishment coaching graduate from 2016. We had a laugh with Bill about this recently, that when Bill left the program, Bill resisted the crap out of the entire program. And he would tell you that if he was here, and so would Carrie. And when he left the program, Carrie said, you might need to go get some therapy. And he did. And he was lucky enough to have an IFS therapist, which created incredible results for him. And so then he went and got himself trained. He's done every single IFS training that I know of and has become like this really influential and powerful IFS coach. He's an incredible human, incredibly self-led. He has a 6,000 member parts work practice, and I think it's about 100 of them that come on a Sunday and a Wednesday to practice parts work. And he's a tool machine. He's written a number of books and workbooks. What I love is that Bill, he floundered for his first couple of years as a coach trying to do IFS because he was just trained to do therapy because that's the only trainings that were out there. And he figured out for himself how to put the two together. And so he has the Compassionate Results Guidebook. He has Self-Led Results. And he really figured this out, and he's become a really close and beloved colleague of mine. And when my IFS practitioner retired, I was looking for who was next for me and realized there are no programs and nobody out there except for Bill that I have found who is doing real coaching, like what we call coaching, with IFS. And so Bill and I have been working together for quite a while now. And if you have any interest in being trained to use IFS for yourself and with your clients, Bill and I are creating that. And so I'm super excited to share. We have a program starting in March. It's called Elevate, the Alchemy of Coaching in IFS. It's the first program to truly integrate IFS and coaching. Intended results made possible by parts work. And this includes the unburdening of exiles. And you're taught to safely and in collaboration with all the parts and be able to unburden those parts that do hold trauma. It's very experiential, this program. There's lots of practice. There's lots of working with your own parts and others. Get a whole manual of tools. We'll have demos. It's just the most incredible personal and professional development program out there. And here's the logistics. We're going to limit this first cohort to 12 experienced coaches so that we can do small groups of 6 with each of us. It'll be 9-month virtual, 2 days a month, a Thursday and a Friday, planning it on the 4th weeks of the month, except for I think one that didn't work because often we take off that 4th week. March through December, registration will officially open October 1st. The early bird cost is $9,950, which is $1,000 off if you register by December 31st. And we're taking deposits to hold the spots. I will tell you that this is the first we've announced the price and the dates, but we've just been chatting about it with different people and have had multiple coaches who have asked us to hold the spot. And one who even asked me if I would take a check before we knew how much it would cost or when it would start. And I do believe it'll fill up before the early bird is over. So that's why we're taking deposits so that you can hold your spot if you would like to be in the program. And here's how you can reach me. There's my email. There's my phone number. There's my little fancy LinkedIn QR code. And please also don't hesitate to reach out to me if anything came up from today, good, bad, or otherwise, or if you have questions or if you want to connect.